WTLF and the Lapsed Entertainment Group, it's This American Work, one McMahon's story, told week by week. I'm Nasal Gas. This American Work, I'm Nasal Gas. Today in our program, Act 8, Ray Morgan. Now, the last time we were with Vince McMahon, I think we got a bit ahead of ourselves. We were talking about 1972 and Vince McMahon's sudden appearance as a ring announcer in Madison Square Garden, following the untimely death of the longtime venerable voice of garden boxing and wrestling. A stroke of luck, one might say.
I didn't kill him.
Well, it was a stroke of luck, one might say, for your desires to get into your dad's business, which he clearly didn't want you in.
Well, no, it's the moment, like I was saying last week, it's the moment to strike. You see the opportunity and you realize you got to go for it. This is the opening.
But you're not just in that position by happenstance. You actually had started to do a little work around the edges with your father. It's a bit confusing to me when I've read your biography in terms of the degree to which you were actually doing some work on the fringes for your dad versus Crushing Stone and all the rest of that.
What is this biography?
Well, they're just little bits and pieces that have been written about you.
I've never written a biography.
I didn't say autobiography. You know the difference, right?
I know that there is no book that has been authorized to be of me.
So, what was the first job you ever did for your dad's wrestling company?
Well, the first job that I ever did, actually, I was a janitor in the offices, and I'd take out the trash.
Oh, interesting. Did you ever set up the rings? I read that you set up the rings for a time.
Eventually, yes. First, I had to. First, my job was to do the ropes. Put the tape, on the ropes and whatnot, and then I would help put the ring together, and then and then I would kept finding opportunity where I could.
What did you think of Ring Crew?
What
did you think of working the Ring Crew?
Well, again, it made me understand kind of the elements of production and realize that, what my dad was doing was really sad, and there could be so much more, and there could be LED screens and sound and music and lights and lasers and things and giant sets with screens and LED lights and things.
So you're thinking about LED lights decades before they were even created, huh?
Absolutely. I mean, in many ways, I definitely could, claim ownership of LED.
So as you're turning and screwing in those turnbuckles, the gears in your head are also turning in terms of what you might do to this place where you get your hands on it.
I mean, I'm just going to put this out there. The gears are always turning. The gears are turning right now, how I can get rid of you, for example. What can I do to eliminate nasal gas from my life? Now, the big question is, will I go through with it? Will I go through with taking nasal gas out of my life? And that's where the mystery is. We don't know.
Right. Just because you're going through the exercise of how you could doesn't mean you will decide to.
No, doesn't mean I won't decide to either. That's the beauty of it.
Is that the same case for you as you're setting up your dad's rings, thinking about taking him over? Is there still that open question as to why you might be formulating a plot, whether or not you'll actually do it? Is that still an open question at this point?
No. For this one in particular, I knew where I was going. I knew the end game. I knew that there was no way that I would lose. That when the time came, I would become heir to the throne. And then I would take the throne, just like Macbeth did.
After your Madison Square Garden ring announcing debut, you came home to Linda And what did you do?
I asked her what, if, I said, do you want to know what it feels like to be announced by me and then pinned by me? And I proceeded to commit devious sexual acts in her rear. In her rear.
So you remember it well then, that particular evening.
Oh, yes.
So here you are. And are you helping with promotion at all too? Hanging posters, that kind of thing?
I mean, yeah, I do odd jobs. I mean, again, what I'm trying to do is at this time, I'm trying to figure out the ins and outs of my father's. Well, I'm trying to figure out the ins and outs of my company. And what
does he pretend not to? Does he pretend not to know what you're doing?
I mean, again, I feel like he's. What I believe happened for him was he said, you know what? If I can see him, maybe I can control him. And so I think in his mind, by actually finally allowing me inside the door of the WWE, that he can find a way to maybe prevent me from achieving my destiny.
I see.
And, and I, when it came to the interactions that I would have with my father, I would never let on that what my goal was. I would act like a very grateful son. I would act like a man who was given an opportunity, and to act grateful. I'm very good at acting grateful. I make people believe that I am grateful for things when really I'm not.
Gotta write that one down. I make people believe I am grateful for things.
Yes.
I'm a bit confused because last week when we were talking about you filling in for the late Johnny Addy and becoming ring announcer in January of 1972 for the Madison Square Garden wrestling shows, you talked about it as some sort of foot in the door, a moment where you now finally had crossed some threshold and now we're in the belly of the beast.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, no, the thing is, you got to look at it from the one perspective. Anybody can be on the ring crew. You can hire some asshole off the street to do it. So, if you will, yes, there were many doors. If you will, think of it like an elevator. All right? Yes, you get into the elevator. But if certain floors have been locked, you don't get access to them. And you can only go so high. So what I was doing is I got into the elevator, and that was certainly a moment, but I couldn't stay on that floor. I had to find the key to turn the other floors on.
I see. So another one of those floors may have been the fact that the year prior to becoming ring announcer at the Garden, you were actually doing a bit of television announcing for your dad. That's why he may have thought you were up to the task, because you had stepped before the camera for him, and it was another circumstance where it wasn't some plan. It wasn't some, gradually brought along production. It was suddenly he needs an announcer, just like he suddenly needs a Garden announcer. This is becoming a trend in your life, which I think is very interesting. But in 1971, another circumstance arose that somehow ended up benefiting you in many important ways in your dad's wrestling territory.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. I mean, I'm one who grabs the brass ring when the brass ring is presented to me. And
so your dad began managing Turner's Arena in Washington, D.C. in 1947, where the wrestling matches were. He got control of the lease to that building in 1954 and renamed it the Capitol Arena, which, of course, was after his namesake Capitol Wrestling Corporation, which was the original name of the wrestling territory your father owned. He actually got that territory on the national Dumont Network for a couple of years. It was called Heavyweight Wrestling from Washington. And essentially the voice of that formative era out of DC for your father was a man by the name of Ray Morgan. Let's play a little bit of sound of Ray Morgan doing his job for your dad.
Hi there again, fans. Ray Morgan welcoming you to professional wrestling from the National Arena in the nation's capital, Washington, D.C. And some exciting matches. Here's how we get underway. A 2 out of 3 fall battle. An Australian tag team match. Bruno's cousin, Antonio Pugliese, from Campobasso, Italy, joins with Arnie Skolin to meet Angelo Savoldi and Tony Alamori. A 1-fall match. Pete Sanchez takes on The Beast. And 1 fall to curfew. Ronnie Atchison of St. Joe, Missouri, a newcomer, meets Masher Sloan.
This sounds like a fucking menu for an Italian restaurant.
I was going to ask you what you think when you heard that clip, and no nostalgia, no warmth. We did the same thing with Johnny Addy. You're thinking he's reading off, the number 12 at Lombardo's or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. I mean, I don't see any, the thing about being an announcer is you need to believe that this person is doing their job, that they believe that you believe they're passionate about the business in front of them. And when it comes to Ray Morgan, I mean, I don't think that he comes across as a believable guy. I believe he's fictional. He's just a guy just announcing. There needs to be a passion about it. There needs to be a love of a charisma, a salesmanship of sorts. And let me put it this way. I wouldn't buy cups from, Buenos Aires from him. He sounds like a bitch.
So I was going to ask you what your impression was of Ray, if you ever met him being around your dad's wrestling shows.
I did meet Ray. I met Ray a few times. Another guy who, he's a man of his time, to say the least. A man of his time. Had his fair share of vices. I believe there was one time I actually had to go pick him up from an opium den. And
how do all these guys you replace end up hooked on drugs?
Listen, I'm not privy to that information. I didn't know them personally. I didn't get into their personal lives. I just know that this guy he spent many a night at a particular opium den. And
let's pull up the picture we have of Ray so we can get a real sense of who you're talking about and picture him in an opium den for the people, if nothing else.
I mean, this guy he screams opioid. Opioid.
Does he really?
I think so. I mean, look at that. I mean, we're looking at a guy, you can see, look at the glasses and the way he is, like, trying to pull off this clean cut individual. When in reality, he's just a deviant, a bottom feeding, anal deviant.
I have to say, he does look like somebody who kind of was involved in Watergate.
I mean, that very well could be true. He could be one of the plumbers, if you will, the plumbers, whatever the fuck they were. For sure, absolutely. And he would frequent an opium den.
Ray was the sports director of WTTG in Washington, D.C., a trusted voice in the market when your father started out based out of Washington, D.C. He also was the announcer for a CBS program called The Roar of the Rails, which was designed to, according to Wikipedia, sell American Flyer toy trains. From 1948 to 1949, he hosted I'd Like to See, an NBC program, which was later adapted by the Dumont Network from 1951.
I also had NBC programs as well.
I'm aware of that. Yeah, just because I said someone else had something doesn't mean I'm implying that you didn't have it and we should like them more or respect them more than you.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, what you're saying isn't that special.
Right. Okay. Well, from 1951 to 52, he hosted a show on NBC called American Inventory. So very much a well-known television personality of the era. Definitely you would think an asset to your father's wrestling outfit to have a a voice like that, a television presence that's respected outside of the wrestling business, calling the wrestling matches.
You say asset, I say asshole.
Well, clearly, though, when your dad saw Ray Morgan, he saw someone who could bring dignity and class to the broadcast. What did you see in Ray Morgan?
What I saw in Ray Morgan was an inept, baseless fraud. Someone who just didn't have. I mean, you're talking about dignity and whatever, and you know, maybe he had that in other announcing jobs when it came to call, you know, doing play-by-play and announcing for entertainment purposes. He did not have what it took. He didn't have the respect for what goes on in the business. He didn't have the love or the passion. He just simply was there collecting a paycheck. And, you know, the reason that I am what I am is because I have the passion to pull the wool over people's eyes. And I don't think that Ray Morgan had any passion at all, except for his opium.
It's just so fascinating to me that, you know, your father has a very stable operation out of the nation's capital.
What my father had, again, and I don't like repeating myself, but what my father had.
I don't like when you do it either, for the record.
What my father had was a safety net. He had a safe little business. You know, he, again, like I said before, if it ain't broke, he wasn't going to fix it. That's why he put trust in people like this, because he didn't see things on a bigger scale. He saw things as narrow-minded as you can possibly get. My dad was a fucking idiot. He was wasted. He wasted a brain. He would have been better off burying his face in a fucking toilet, because he didn't have not only the vision, but the balls to go to it. He wanted his safe little fucking, his little park.
He wanted his Ray Morgan.
He wanted his Ray Morgan.
Because I find it so interesting that he had this stable, like you said, sort of safe operation for so many years and had his personnel in place and things were going swimmingly. You moved to Maryland in 69, and by 71, you're kind of, you know, around the business while doing other odd jobs, as we talked about. And suddenly things start changing. Longtime staples like Johnny Addy go away. And Ray Morgan also will, as we'll talk about. Something else that happens in 71. Your father, who had a show on WDCA TV, Channel 20 in Washington for a while, saw the show canceled. And that was for the first time since 1966. The show that featured Ray Morgan, a local institution in D.C., was canceled. Ray Morgan was tethered to D.C. He was of D.C. He lived in D.C. He was D.C. in a lot of ways. So your dad negotiated with some folks and secured a Sunday time slot, according to Tim Hornbaker's book, Capital Revolution, on this time period in your dad's territory. And so that Sunday time slot was sort of an abbreviated showing on tape, Hornbaker writes. Program shifted from 9:30 in the morning to 3:30 in the afternoon, but by September 1971, it was completely canceled. Hornbaker writes, McMahon himself chose to end the show as the national arena events were failing to make money. It was believed people were afraid to travel to the venue and its neighborhood at night. Thus, McMahon ended 43 years of weekly grappling entertainment. There's a piece here in the Washington Post that we're going to read from here. This is your father speaking to Washington, D.C. as a base of operations. You're coming around, and all of a sudden, running in Washington's a big problem. Running in Washington is not sustainable. We're not making enough money. We've got to move. This piece in the Post says the Coliseum is simply too big for weekly shows and the programs at the National Arena are losing too much money, even with their television value. The live shows at the National Arena now bring in about $1,000 revenue. When they moved there in 1965, the gate was $2,600, which McMahon called the break-even mark. And then he's quoted your dad in this piece in the Washington Post as saying, after the King deal, he's referring to the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King when he says that, and the rioting that followed. Your dad said it seemed tougher and tougher to get people out at night. Asked if the shows were being stopped because of the neighborhood, McMahon replied, well, actually, that's the truth. It doesn't seem to improve any. That's why we held out so long. I can't see any improvement in the environment there. By the same token, the piece reads, McMahon said he has never heard of one of his wrestling customers suffering any physical harm outside the arena because of muggings and the like. There are no problems of that kind as far as I know, just a fear, he said, that people have. They're afraid to come.
I'm not afraid to come.
You're not afraid to come?
No.
Did you feel like that was up in the air in terms of if folks, that really had to be driven home right there, huh?
Well, I mean, anyone who's afraid to come needs to really check their love life at the door, honestly.
Not only are you not afraid to come, I feel like you sort of insist on it.
I mean, that is very true. There is never a time when I am committing a sexual act where I do not finish.
I believe the line is, you will
finish.
satisfy me.
I will, listen, I will be satisfied.
Since buying out the previous promoter, this piece reads, for $60,000 in 1953, McMahon and his associates have built pro wrestling into a multi-million-dollar operation. He controls 40 wrestlers who put on at least a dozen shows weekly. The Empire started here in 1957.
And
when
wouldn't
McMahon
it be
gambled
amazing if the company could put on 1,000 shows a year?
Wouldn't that be something?
Yeah, it would be something. You got to have vision. You got to have balls. You got to have passion.
The Empire started here in 1957 when McMahon gambled that television would bring new fans to the live shows instead of killing the gate. He won. 1957 to 1971, I don't know. That whole stuff about the King riots and the civil unrest. I mean, this is years after that.
Yeah.
Assassination. I don't know, Vince. Sounds like a kayfabe reason to me to leave Washington. It strikes me that shortly after you get the gig we mentioned doing MSG ring announcing after Johnny Addy dies, that suddenly your dad feels compelled to switch tapings away from the location where, I don't know, Ray Morgan happens to live and go to Allentown, Hamburg, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I told him, I mean, see, this is again, when push comes to shove, what is the most important thing in any business venture?
Not sure, you tell me. I'm afraid to get it wrong.
Money. It all comes down to money. All right? So when you are trying to take over something, when you are, I shouldn't say trying, when you are reclaiming your birthright, when you are taking the throne that you deserve, the best way to kind of inch your way in is to convince those, or if you will, to convince my dad into thinking he can just save money by having me do all these jobs, because I won't ask for anything more pay-wise. I'll build your ring. I'll tape your ropes. I'll ring announce. I'll do commentary for the same price. And therefore, you're not paying all these other men's salaries. Yeah. Find your way, find your door, get inside, and let the parasite do his work.
So your angle was to work others out of a job.
No, I was there to compete for my job. And if you can't compete, then...
How are you supposed to compete with somebody that basically does it for free?
Not my problem. I won. You see, I will do anything. That's the kind of competitor that I am. I will do it all. If you think there are things that I wouldn't do, I guarantee you, there's that word again, that I either would do them or I already have done them.
Now, are you, to some degree, playing on your father's penny-pinching ways here? He used to, jangle quarters all the time. Are you looking at a man who's like, hey, he says he doesn't want me in the business, blah, blah, blah. But if I do some of his grunt work for free, like television announcing, ring announcing, putting up the ring, he can't pass it up because he's a cheap motherfucker.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in the same time, here's the thing. See, he doesn't see any better because he knows, like he looks at it as, well, I got my son under my eye. I'm able to watch every move that he makes. I'm able to see what he's doing. So, and if I'm willing to work for free, I mean, it's like, wow, he must really love me. My son must really love me to be willing to do that for my business. But no, Dad, it's my business. You've just been holding it for me.
Did you suggest he move the tapings to Allentown and Hamburg, wherever it started, in Pennsylvania?
Yes, I did.
Why did you do that?
Things in Pennsylvania are just a little bit cheaper. But then at the same time, I could get closer to New York.
Did it have anything to do with the fact that Ray Morgan might not be willing to travel that far?
Ray Morgan is a simple man. Ray Morgan is a man who doesn't like to commute more than 15 minutes to his job. When my dad said that we were going to move the tapings to Pennsylvania, he says, but Vince, that's not 15 minutes away. How am I going to get there? I said, Dad, I'll take care of this one. And my dad walked away. And I leaned into Ray Morgan. Our noses were less than an inch apart. And I looked him straight in the eye. And I said, Ray, you're fired.
Shortly after the shift to Hamburg, moving the tapings there, Ray Morgan requests from your father a pay increase. Additional travel time, it makes sense. He lived in the Washington area. And suddenly the base of operations is moving, and where he's expected to be to announce the shows is moving. Not exactly what he signed up for. And in Tim Hornbaker's book, he cites some arbitration documents from a case involving Capital Wrestling that says, Ray Morgan requested this of your father as late as 1972, and your dad, along with partner Phil Zacco, communicated with a rep from the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, AFTRA, a union, to figure out a better pay schedule for Ray Morgan. And it was determined, according to the book, that the commentator would receive $230 an hour at $1,380 for 2 days of announcing work. However, Morgan wouldn't be the one getting the improved amount. That would be somebody else. As your father chose instead to pick you at age 27 to replace Ray Morgan. We have a piece of sound here that puts it in context. If you could please, producer, hit Vince on Ray Morgan.
My dad had been having problems with his television announcer from Washington, D.C. by the name of Ray Morgan. My dad had a meeting with Ray Morgan, and I happened to be there. It was just the three of us. And Ray had told my dad, you either meet my price or I'm walking out right now. And the show was about ready to begin. And my dad said, well, then there's the door. Don't let it stop you on the way out. And I was so proud of my dad because it's the first time I saw him, in that environment. And this guy was demanding something. My dad threw him out of his office. And I thought, yeah, that's really cool. And he turned to me and he says, you're going to be the announcer. I said, I've never done anything like that in my life. He says, no problem.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Championship Wrestling. My name is Vince McMahon.
Yeah. That's about right.
You were proud of your dad in that moment.
Well, again, for the sake of television, for the sake of being the face of and the leader of my company, I changed the details a little bit for that interview, saying that he did this and da-da-da, and I was proud of him. In reality, he was a coward. He couldn't fire people to save his life. So I took control, and I said, Dad, this guy needs to go. Ray Morgan is weighing you down. You need youth. You need strength. You need somebody who's loyal to you, Dad. Ray Morgan is not loyal. He's been eyeballing your wife. He wants to fuck your wife. Ray
What?
Morgan needs to go. Absolutely.
Is that true?
I don't know. But that's what I told my dad. And so he said, but son, I can't do that. I can't fire somebody. I'm not good at that. I said, well, Dad, let me take care of it. I'll tell you what. I'll give you the credit for it, for standing up and doing the right thing. But I'm going to fire his ass.
What did you do?
I went in there and I grabbed Ray Morgan and I said, get the fuck out of here, you piece of shit. We're done with you. Get out. And then
Was he shocked and surprised? Did he think things were going well enough in his ask for, it sounds like a reasonable ask for more compensation for the travel.
I mean, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But I wasn't going to let him continue. I was beginning my reign. I was getting rid of the dead weight.
Let me ask you a question, Vince. If he refused to leave the premises, if he didn't accept that you had the authority to fire him, what do you think might have happened next?
Well, fortunately, he did have the wherewithal to know that he was terminated. But I'm not afraid to get my hands dirty, if that's what you're asking. Would I have dragged him out of the building and stomped on his face out in the alleyway? Maybe. Would I
He's
have
not ready for TV then.
would I have tossed him out of from whatever story we were on, out the window to the floor? Maybe. Would I have dropped a fucking chair on his face in the office? Maybe. Fortunately for Ray Morgan, he knew his time was up.
Could he tell, just like your dad could, by looking in your eyes, Vince?
If you don't know what I want when I'm looking at you, it's because I don't want you to know.
But if you do want me to know,
You know. And you get the fuck out.
so what did he do? Did he just collect his things when you said that and just left?
He didn't say a damn word. He just simply got up, walked out, and I never saw that piece of shit again.
This is your moment.
But I'm going to give it to my dad. Because everything that I do needs to go back to him to make it seem like what my dad is cool, to make it seem like we have a family business, to make it seem like I'm loyal to my dad, to make it seem like I'm willing to do things for him, when in reality, I'm just putting my pieces into place.
And when you step in front of that camera for the first time, having suddenly gotten the job, even though as we're learning here on This American Work, it may hardly have been a surprise to you that things played out this way on this set of tapings in Hamburg. Do you feel a certain sense of conquest? Because as confident as you've sounded and recalling your mindset in the lead up to this, I mean, you're crushing stone, you're living, in sort of out of the way town in Maryland. It's not entirely clear that you're going to find your way to the forefront of the business that you wanted. Yet here you are, due to circumstances, in front of the most prominent television camera and holding the most prominent ring announcing microphone in your father's company by 71, 72.
Yes. What's your question?
Did you feel a sense of conquest? Did you feel like you'd already done what you set out to do? Overcoming his doubts.
No. Well, overcoming his doubts was never the issue. It was reclaiming myself. Reclaiming what was stolen from me. That's the goal. So did I feel like I had succeeded? No, not yet. I felt like I was at the beginning, the very beginning of my journey to discover who I was, what I was, and what I was going to be.
The confidence you speak with now belies what you've said in the past. You said in your company's book, WW50, scared to death. I went out that night when Morgan left and did the best I could. The person he gave me to work with was a gentleman that went by the name of Arnold Skoland. He was a great guy, but the problem with Arnold was that I would set him up and ask him a question, and he would simply say, yep. Or I'd set up another question, and he would go, nope.
Yeah.
So Arnold wasn't a lot of help to me in those days. I think Arnold lasted like 3 or 4 weeks. Then I said, Pop, please, you got to give me somebody else. I'm dying out there. I'm working by myself. So he gave me someone else, and one of those individuals he gave me down the line was Antonino Rocca. Rocca was difficult to understand. He had a really thick accent and was not terribly bright in terms of that job. And then he gave me Pat Patterson, a French-Canadian, but it was a blast. It was really learning on the job. I'd learned so much by doing commentary and by doing the interviews as well. And I learned a lot about what makes the business tick, the personalities, the storylines, and things of that nature.
Yes. See, all that is true except for one thing. I wasn't nervous. I said I was nervous because, again, I want to create a perception.
You had to pretend you didn't see this coming.
Exactly.
You had to pretend you had no possible way to prepare for this moment.
Exactly. But I knew. I knew that this was it. This was just the beginning. I mean, what people don't know is that I was actually, even though it was my first time on camera, blah, 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 blah. All the people that you mentioned there, that I mentioned, I'd actually been working with privately that my dad didn't know about. And I said, I told them, hey, I think I want to be an announcer or something. Can you guys give me some pointers? They did. And those issues that I mentioned there, the idea that Arnold Skoland was, only saying yup and nope, because I told him to do that. I said, look, you're in. I want to get in. Let me shine. Same thing with Roca. I said, look, go crazy with your accent. Make it sound like they can't understand you. I need this moment. And then I had Patterson. And Patterson knew what I was doing. Patterson always knew. And he knew I was right.
I'm sure we'll talk about him as the weeks turn here in This American Work, but do you miss those days with Pat? Microphone to microphone, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't. I can say that. I mean, there are a lot of things about Pat Patterson that he was a deviant, no question, but the guy had a mind for the business like no other, and there were a lot of tight spots, and there was no one more loyal than Patterson.
Could your dad have used someone like Pat Patterson in his inner circle?
Yeah. In fact, well, that's the beauty of it. He thought he did have that person. He thought that person was me.
Back to I can't get this out of my mind. I can't, something doesn't seem right here. When I'm reading this article from the Washington Post about your dad leaving Washington, D.C. as its base of taping operations because of the social unrest due to the King assassination, just how many years had passed and just how, I don't know, how flimsy of an excuse that seems to be. It just seems like the kind of thing somebody says when they're trying to wallpaper over the real issue. It's sort of like store traffic is slow and someone blames the rain. Store traffic is slow, and then the same person blames it's sunny out. Everybody's at the beach. I mean, which is it? And I don't know. That just seems like a catch-all excuse that the streets are too dangerous. It seems like he's got another reason to move to Hamburg. I wonder, do you remember any of this unrest that your father is talking about outside the arena, the former Turner's Arena in Washington, the National Arena?
I mean, I don't recall much of the unrest. I believe that, if you will, it was more of a situation like Sergeant Slaughter had bomb threats.
Right. Did it seem at all, I don't know, staged, the unrest around the arena?
I mean, it was. It was all fake.
What?
There was no unrest. It was completely fabricated.
Here's your dad in the article, quoted, national newspaper, one of the most prominent newspapers in the country, in the world, in fact, saying, yeah, that's the real reason. I mean, people were afraid to come.
Yeah. Yeah, because I told him to say that. I said, look, it's better for business. Go up to Pennsylvania. Get out of D.C. D.C.'s too, I gave him these reasons. Again, I gave him the reason of me working for cheap or nothing. Get rid of these clowns.
Nothing. It sounds like you took every last penny of Ray Morgan's raise there.
Listen, my dad offered it to me because I did some dirty work for him.
Say more now.
Say more now?
What kind of dirty work?
Well, I mean, when my dad accepted my suggestions as to move out, I had to break contracts with the arena. And again, my dad is too much of a coward to do that. He works, his mindset is that of loyalty. Again, like these territory fuckers. They work on loyalty and thinking of everybody as a unit, working together. And that's not who I am. I'm a competitor and I go to win. If it means that I need to hurt people or break agreements, I will do it. And that's what I did. I did that for my dad. Well, I did it for me. But I told him I was doing it for him because this was a better option. And he believed me.
Said for years that Martin Luther King is one of your heroes. In fact, every year at Martin Luther King Day, you set aside some time at the beginning of your Monday Night Raw broadcast to pay tribute to Dr. King. And as I'm looking back here at the set of circumstances and how the King-related riots were blamed for moving your dad's territories, operations out of D.C. and into Pennsylvania, which then coincided with you becoming the face of his television show. Could this be, I don't know, maybe one small reason why you love Dr. King so much?
Absolutely. I'm grateful to Dr. King because he helped give me my business. He helped give me my empire.
By dying and creating riots as a result.
Well, yeah, and giving me an excuse to give to my dad, to give to the press.
Really, more than anything, Dr. King's lasting contribution, one might argue.
I mean, I've never had, in many ways, there's nobody who has had a better impact on my life than Dr. King.
And just 4 years after, Ray Morgan walks off the set, if you will, in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, and you become the announcer. He passes away in New Jersey as a result of cancer. He was.
I didn't give him cancer.
No, I understand that. Yeah, I don't know how one would do that, but I got to write up in the New York Times, and it seemed like a sudden death, but sudden. Not that he had the illness, but do you remember visiting him at all, Vince, when he was in the hospital or anything like that?
Yes, I did. I wanted to make sure that his treatments were going as according to plan.
That's very nice. And what did you find?
I found that indeed they were, and that he was slowly dying.
Did you hold his hand? Did you tell him, we appreciate all you've done for the business? Even if it didn't end that well, usually in moments like that, all is forgiven,
I looked at Ray Morgan in the eye and I said, when you go, Ray, it won't be soon enough.
Did you say anything to his family after that?
I shook all their hands and I said, I wish you all luck in your future endeavors.
That's really the phraseology he used.
Yes. Each family member said, thank you. I wish you luck in your future endeavors. Thank you. I wish you luck in your future endeavors. Thank you. I wish you luck in your future endeavors.
It says here in the book we've talked about a lot in the series, Sex, Lies, and Headlocks, needing to find a larger space. The elder McMahon decided to
they should really take away the sex and the headlocks and just say the book is lies. That's what it is.
Yeah. I figured you'd say as much because there's a lot of things in here that aren't too flattering about you. Needing to find a larger space, the elder McMahon decided to tape his shows at a 1,000-seat theater in Hamburg, Pennsylvania, and a slightly larger pavilion nearby on a fairgrounds complex in Allentown, Pennsylvania. Because the show's taped only once every 3 weeks, Vinny had ample time to try other things. At first, he tried his hand at booking oldies shows with acts like Jerry Lee Lewis and Dottie West. I had never heard this before. What do you remember about booking some musical acts, some shows? Jerry Lee Lewis, Dottie West?
Well, I was learning. I was trying to figure out what it took to bring in. What would it take to blend this carny bullshit world that we live in and blend it with mainstream entertainment personalities? And I said, I think we can do this. Learn how to promote the music business in order to bring in a pop star and change the game. Yeah.
Seeds being planted, perhaps.
I would say yes. Well, I would say seeds being planted? No, seeds were planted.
I hesitate to ask this, but was this maybe the first instance of you failing in promotional efforts outside of professional wrestling?
I don't recall.
Become a bit of a theme for you.
When did I fail?
I don't know. It's not like these Jerry Lee Lewis and Dottie West shows were well remembered or chronicled.
No, see, again, because you're looking at the small picture. You're looking at what it was. These, you look at it as, did they make money? Did they succeed? Because you can't find anything about them. I look at them as stepping stones. One small victory. Building them up so that I can take on the world.
Did you like Jerry Lee Lewis's music?
He's got a very good, he's got some interesting tunes.
Didn't you name one of your pay-per-views after one of his tunes?
I believe I did. I believe it was Fully Loaded.
I was thinking Great Balls of Fire, Vince.
Oh no, that's reference to my genitalia.
I'll say so much for that. Well, you have time in your hands. You're trying other things in addition to, making the every 3 weeks television tapings in Hamburg, Pennsylvania. Are you now feeling like you work in the wrestling business as opposed to other odd jobs and a little bit of wrestling on the side?
No, I feel like I work in the entertainment business.
And it's about to get a lot more intense for you on that front. As the aforementioned Sex, Lies, and Headlocks book says, then one day, your father gets a call from a private investigator looking for the Vince McMahon who'd run up a trail of bad debts. As the story goes, Vincent listened carefully, then realized the investigator was talking about his son. That was when he decided it was better to keep the kid close rather than let him run down the family's name. Next time on This American Work, Episode 8, From Ringside to Bangor. We'll see you then on This American Work.